Good evening, everyone. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I'm really honored to welcome you to tonight's conversation with Rosalind Wiseman and Charlie Kuhn. Thanks for attending. FAN is a nonprofit organization that presents a high-quality speaker series offered free to the public on a wide variety of topics, including human development, mental health, education, and social justice, just to name a few. We have over 100 videos of our past events archived on both our website and on our YouTube channel, so please be sure to explore those. Very good. And now for tonight's event, just to give you some of the format, we're going to begin with a short presentation by Rosalind, and then she'll be joined by Charlie, who is the co-founder of Cultures of Dignity with her. Later on, we'll have the pleasure to welcome Katrina Fernandez, an educator from Denver, whose school district is engaged with Cultures of Dignity. And now for my formal introduction. So Rosalind Wiseman is the co-founder, as I mentioned, and chief content officer of Cultures of Dignity, which is an organization that shifts the way communities think about our physical and emotional well-being by working in close partnership with the experts of those communities, young people, educators, policymakers, and business and political leaders. Her most recent publications include the Distance Learning Playbook for Parents, which is tonight's book, and Owning Up Curriculum, published in July, a comprehensive social justice program for grades 4 through 12, which is in widespread use across the world. Ms. Wiseman, Rosalind, is the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Queen Bees and Wannabes, Helping Your Daughter Survive Cliques, Gossip, Boyfriends, and the New Realities of Girl World. It's the groundbreaking best-selling book that was the basis for the movie and Broadway musical Mean Girls, and Masterminds and Wingmen, Helping Our Boys Cope with Schoolyard Power, Locker Room Tests, Girlfriends, and the New Rules of Boy World, which addresses the social lives of boys and was awarded Best Parenting Book by Books for a Better Life in 2014. It's now my pleasure to bring on Rosalind Wiseman.
Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure. Thank you, Lonnie, for this incredible privilege to be able to come back and be with FAN. Before we jump into all of the things that I'm going to talk about and Charlie and Katrina are going to talk about, I also just want to introduce Charlie. So if Charlie can just, we can see him for a moment. And Charlie, the last time I was at FAN, I was working on the Masterminds and Wingmen for boys. And I was working and doing all of this work for books, but I wanted to do a bigger systemic change. And so I had the privilege and honor of being able to start working with this man who's going to be co-presenting tonight. So Charlie Kuhn, this is, thank you for being here and thank you for presenting with me. And I guess
I'll just welcome and glad to be here.
And also I'd like to just briefly introduce Katrina Fernandez, as Lonnie mentioned, who is a wonderful school administrator that's going to come back on at around 7:30 with Charlie to be able to answer questions about school. So there's Katrina. So I'm bringing a wonderful team with me that is going to do our best to give you what are the best skills that we need for right now. So let's just have a moment. So I'm drinking a glass of water, but I hope you're drinking a cup of tea or a glass of wine. And let's just have a moment for the end of our day to just like settle. And then we're going to get started. So let's just take a moment. I know I need to. Everybody's had, for whatever reason, busy days. Okay. So the Distance Learning Playbook, when I was asked to write this book in July, when Lonnie is magical, she knows basically when the perfect time is to do things. But I didn't know how perfect it would be in December to be, unfortunately, that this book would be so relevant. And so I was asked in July to write this with my wonderful, incredible team of people. And that is John Hattie, Doug Fisher, and Nancy Frey. And so what's amazing is that what we're really looking at is our village. And so the village, has always been, it's that village, that cliche of it takes a village to raise a child has always been true, but it has also always been really complicated. And right now it can feel really complicated. And one of the reasons, of course, why it can feel so complicated is that we've got all of these rules about how we're supposed to socialize with each other or not. And people feel different things about it. And so people can and also feel really strongly about these opinions, and it can really affect our children. And so one of the things that overarching, before I get into like social media and how much your child should be doing on top of their online schooling is to have a bigger picture, and of a bigger picture so that we understand what the stakes are, and so that we have a compass that can really help us no matter what the situations that we are facing. And so the question I want to ask you all before we get started is, like diving into the specifics, is what do you want children in your village to learn from you? So right now, just take a moment and just think about what is it that you want, not only your own children, but children in your village to learn from you during this time. And so one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do, no matter again what the strategies are, or what are the things I tell you about distance learning, is that we need principles, and principles guide our behavior and they guide our actions. And so these are the ones that I want you to just think about in the time that you're going to spend with me today. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. I've been working in education for a very long time, and it's really important to realize that you know your kids the best, and I want you to remember that. We want to be easy on people and hard on ideas. We live in a culture that sometimes can be incredibly hard on people, but easy on ideas. We want to flip the script basically so that we can be easy on people. People can make mistakes, and that allows us to be as rigorous as we need to be to apply our best thinking to this really difficult, challenging situation that we're in. Conflict is inevitable. Collaboration is essential. Guess what? We are going to be in conflict with like everybody, our children, maybe the teachers that our kids have right now, school administrators. I mean, it's just a mess, and it's messy, and life is always messy. But right now it's really messy. Like, I didn't really like my children yesterday very much. I don't know about you all, but I have 17 and 19-year-olds. They're probably hearing me say this. I'm sure they agree that, like, you know, it's really hard, and conflict is inevitable, and we need to know how to get through it with skills. And that allows for collaboration, and collaboration is 1,000,000,000% essential right now. Listening, I want to really challenge us to define it as being prepared to be changed by what we hear. And asking for help is a strength. It is not a weakness. If there was ever a time where we should be clear that asking for help is not a weakness, it is right now. Everybody is going to be overwhelmed, and we need to be able to see that who we go to is a strength. It is a capacity that we know who to go to. And lastly, is that I'd really like us to have opportunities for play. We have to have moments for levity. We have to have moments of giving ourselves a break. The stakes are high. The stakes are very high. Let's not make any mistake about it. But we're not going to get a redo on this year. We're moving forward. We are figuring out how to do best by our kids. And these principles give us the direction, no matter what the situation is, to guide our behavior and guide our decision making. So I'm going to refer back to this for the time that I'm speaking to you tonight. I'm just going to keep referring back to these principles to guide us in the most significant, the most concrete skills that I give you. Okay. So the other thing I want you to think about, and sorry about the white background, sorry about that, is that happiness is really actually going to be the key to understanding what a routine is, the foundation of a routine to keep us emotionally sane and healthy during this time. And so we have to, and this has always been the case, is that happiness, there are 5 components of it. And that is meaning beyond oneself, hope of success, meaningful social connection, satisfying work, and a place to process and find peace. Now, the goal is that life is going to be hard. It's always going to be hard. Right now, it's a little bit harder. But if we can focus on these 5 things, no matter how hard life gets, it gets a little bit easier if we can focus on this. And what's amazing about this is, especially in our country where we are so divided, that this is actually one of the things that makes everybody happy, is to have these 5 things, regardless of our ethnicity, our political leanings, our age, our anything. These are the things that give us purpose in life. So one of the things I want you to think about right now to start for you to be able to build the foundation of a routine. And if you started a routine before, I think it's, and I'll speak for myself very much in this way, is that the last couple of weeks have been a revamping of like seriousness of all of this. I was taking it seriously before, but there's a fear and there's a sense of of purpose and of we've got to get through this that I feel like that I've experienced in a different way just in the last week. And so what I'd really like for you all to think about is a way of creating or recreating and revisiting what is the routine that's going to get you and your family to be the best in online schooling and to have mental health and wellness. So I want you to think about what brings you happiness. What are the things, you can't do all of these things probably every single day, but I'm just going to start with one thing, which is this. If we start in the mornings, and if your child can start in the mornings with a routine where they are having a place to process and find peace, which could include just a cup of hot cocoa and just sitting quietly for 5 minutes, or for you to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just sit quietly for 5 minutes. That is one of the most important things that we can do for our routine to begin the day so that we are better able to think through how to have these other things of meaning beyond oneself, a hope of success, a meaningful social connection, and satisfying work. All right. So one of the things that we know is that it's so important to have self-regulation right now, and that is the ability to direct one's behavior, emotions, and thoughts. And the result actually with online learning or any kind of learning is that children go on to become their own teachers if they are able to self-regulate. And so what that means is that they can create, they can innovate, and they can think critically. And so the reason that I'm starting with this is because when we have this as an overarching understanding of how we approach young people's education, is that we can think about what is working for them and what is not. So for example, if your child is being assigned busy work, difficult work online, so that they have to go through things, but it's not rigorous, it's not challenging them in the way to be creative, to innovate, to think critically, that's how you know that you have a problem on online learning. If you have these things, then it can be hard, it can be rigorous, but it's meaningful. So just as a way to think about how do I value and how do I define what is meaningful work for my child, this is also a way to think about it. Now, we also know that what's really important is that we have emotional regulation. And so in the Distance Learning Playbook, yes, there are things on what should your child be reading or at what level and all of those things that are so important. But alongside those, what we know is that self-regulation, emotional regulation, and social skills are absolutely critical, essential for them to be able to get through school and to have school be meaningful to them, no matter what it is, especially when the only certainty we have right now is uncertainty. When we have gone from maybe online live school and hybrid school to now for many of us doing virtual with an expectation that we will go back at some point to some kind of hybrid. So we need, if there was ever a time for us to understand that soft skills are not soft skills, they are life critical, essential skills for young people to be able to develop so they can be critical thinkers and engage in their education, no matter what that education is. This is now the time that this is so extraordinarily clear. So what does that mean? Emotional regulation means getting very clear about your emotions because that empowers you to define your experiences. So emotions are real, but they are not permanent. I have probably said this to myself once a day since September. And you can change the way that you feel. So if you're having a day when you are feeling really anxious, or if your child is feeling really anxious or really frustrated, it is so incredibly important to remind yourself and to remind them that emotions are real. So you saying to them, oh, don't worry about it, get over it, it'll be fine, is not going to be helpful. That doesn't build resilience. What builds resilience is actually saying to them, those feelings that you're having are real, but they aren't permanent. You can change the way that you feel. And the more granular that you can teach your child to be, the more they're going to have their feelings, they're going to have more options to understand and communicate those feelings. So when your child comes to you and says, I'm so stressed, I would strongly suggest that you say, can you explain to me what's stressing you out? Can you give me some more words about that? Because the more words they have, the more you're going to be able to figure out what's really going on. And guess what? So will they. Because sometimes it's really hard to even know what's happening for yourself. So the more words you have, the better off you're going to be. And what happens with that is, by the way, emotional intelligence increases and anxiety decreases. So we know that these skills, be able to do that, to get granular, are just imperative in life, and they are so clearly imperative right now. So Have you gotten into, I was laughing when I was doing this, getting ready for the presentation today. Conflict, yeah, is inevitable. Like I said a few minutes ago, like I think it was in the summer where I got into a situation with my children where I just could not stand them anymore. And then I thought, they're never going to leave my house. Like my children are never going to leave my house. What am I going to do? and they think the same way as well. So conflict is inevitable. And what I'm going to share with you now is a blueprint for no matter who is in conflict, meaning you with a teacher, for example, you with your own child, your child with you. These are the things that I think are the most important to be able to manage and navigate conflict more effectively. So I want you to remember it is a moment. It is not a lifetime. I think sometimes as parents, and I can, with my parent hat on, I have had moments where it feels like, oh my gosh, this is a lifetime. I will be dealing with this problem forever. Or you might be feeling right now, the situation we're in right now is a lifetime. It will never, ever end. My children will never leave school to have like a normal school. And I was looking at a school district that's around where FAN is based this afternoon. And I saw the average last year for young people was 20 hours of extracurricular activities last year that young people were doing. And now they're not doing any. So of course it feels like we're all so fraught. So I want us to remember it is a moment, not a lifetime, whatever it is. When we are aggravated at somebody, we want to keep it short and we don't want to repeat. So this includes if you're frustrated at a teacher or if you're frustrated with your child, do not give 27 reasons about why you're frustrated. Choose one, look for a pattern maybe, but you really want to choose one and don't repeat yourself. I think anytime, basically when you're talking to your own children, by the way, that any conversation you have with them where you're expressing frustration and anger or whatever with them, like they didn't clean the kitchen, like, or, whatever, like happens in my house all the time, is you're going to have multiple times over the lifetime of your child living with you to have that conversation. So you don't need to repeat it right there in the conversation. Next is we want to keep it to 3 things, like I said, at most, and time and place. Time and place is so incredibly important. So if you are feeling like you're getting emotionally hijacked, like you cannot, or anxiety is taking over, your emotions are taking over, it's really important to say like, I actually can't do this right now. You can always come back. And so one of the things that I want you to think about is, remember my principle is listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear. So let me say that a little bit more clearly. Listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear. And so when you are in a moment of conflict or when you're trying to prepare to have a difficult conversation, I want you to ask yourself, is listening possible right now? One of the things that I have found to be very successful, especially if you have children that are fighting or squabbling, and a lot of siblings are telling me that they've actually never been closer, but they are squabbling a lot, and then parents think they're fighting. If there is a pattern where a child in your home is not treating another person with dignity, with worth, then that's a problem. And the thing that I really want us to think about is, because dignity is really this inherent worth that just people should have, and that is sacrosanct in a family, and it should be in a school, it should be in a family, a school, a community, a country. That dignity is absolutely an inherent thing that people are just given. And so what we have found is that the strategy that we have, if you've got siblings who are really fighting, have them prepare to talk about exactly what they don't like, and then they're going to sit down and they're going to take 60 seconds to say to the other person exactly what they don't like. And the other person actually has to listen without rolling their eyes or sighing or all of those things that people and families do that get so irritating. And then the other person is going to say their 60 seconds of what is bothering them. And then there can be a time for clarifying questions. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but just like a moment of like clarifying questions to figure out, how do I really understand what the other person is saying? Now, is this going to be perfect? No. Is it going to be messy? Yes. Is it going to go perfectly? No, because that's not what happens in families. But the more that we model this kind of behavior, the more we literally are modeling how to have civil discourse and how we can listen to each other and be able to have positive and healthy boundaries with each other and really be able to be in relation with each other where dignity is our bedrock. So here's the definition. Here's your really important thing for these family dynamics, or if you're talking to teachers, for example, or writing to teachers, having a Zoom call with teachers, it's really important to know the difference between a curious question, which acknowledges like what the situation is and you want to know more about someone's perspective and experiences. You are showing curiosity, versus a non-curious question, which is dismissing the other person's perspective and experiences, and it feels like they're taking away the other person's dignity. And so we've got, if you're doing that sibling conflict exercise that I gave you of the 60 seconds, I would also level set as the parent to remind them what a curious question looks like and what a non-curious question looks like. Non-curious question is not allowed in a family because that is going against somebody's dignity. And that of course goes in all ways. All right, so now we're going to pivot a little bit. And the way we're going to pivot, or the reason we're pivoting, is because this all speaks to how incredibly important relationships are. And we know that for young people with distance learning, that their relationships with their friends are extraordinarily important. Yes, they are going to school to learn all different kinds of academic things. But they are the glue that holds a school together is the relationships that people have and the friendships that young people have with each other. And so I want you, and there are also going to be kinds of conflicts that happen within that. So from acquaintances to things that are happening online to any kind of relationship that your children are going through with distance learning, I just want to also level set the difference between different kinds of behaviors that are not great, because everything is actually not bullying. So we're just going to level set on what those things are because relationships are so important. So rude is unintentionally excluding, isolating, or hurting someone's feelings. Mean is intentionally excluding, isolating, or hurting someone's feelings. Drama is a conflict between people that is entertaining to everybody else. And of course, social media makes that very easy, unfortunately, for things to be drama to other people. And bullying is repeatedly abusing power against another person. So it's important because bullying, for the most part, before the pandemic, was in general blown off by young people a lot, or they thought it was super extreme and it didn't really apply to them. And so we need to be realistic. And these definitions, by the way, were created by the young people that we work with at Cultures of Dignity. And so this gives you like, what is it that your young person might be dealing with? And at the same time, remembering that they could be having conflicts with friends that could be included in this list of rude or mean or drama or bullying. And right now, because friendships are they're always important, but it can feel like you can't leave friendships at all, that one of the things I want you to just really hold really dear in your heart is that we have to affirm friendships for young people and for your children. And at the same time, we have to focus on what are the boundaries for them about being in good relations with their friends. And so one of the exercises that I would have you strongly suggest that you do with your kids, and if teachers, if you are listening to this, that you can do in your classes, is that you can say, what are the top 3 things that you have to have in a friendship? And most kids are going to say trust, loyalty, and be myself. That is an opportunity to get granular. What does that mean? What does loyalty mean? What does be yourself mean? What does being honest mean? So it's an opportunity to increase that emotional intelligence. And then we want to ask, well, what are the 3 things that maybe you might need to take a pause on the relationship? And then they can list those things. And then if they get into a situation with a friend or an acquaintance or whoever that's really pressing on those things, they've got a way to compare their criteria with what they've said they need to maybe when they need to pause. And that means they're getting emotionally granular. It means they're increasing their emotional intelligence. And it also means their anxiety will decrease because they are not, maybe you're not fixing the problem 100%, but you're giving them the tools to cope. And that's what they're looking for. So this is the thing that I want us to like as an encapsulation of friendships, is that we are not born knowing how to act in ways that honor everyone's dignity. We have to practice. And this opportunity right now, when things are so fraught, really gives us that opportunity to honor people's dignity and to practice that. And part of that practice is identifying behavior of others that violates our worth or the worth of others. And so now, in my last kind of thing that I'm going to do before we open it up to Charlie and to Katrina, is that of course we have to talk about social media. And so social media, of course, is the way that young people are maintaining their friendships right now, for the most part. And so here is our way of looking at using technology and social media: treating yourself with dignity, treating others with dignity, and treating the community with dignity. It all goes under that principle. And then from there, you think about, and this comes from Devorah Heitner, who wrote Raising Digital Natives, who is so wonderful, is that you can put social media and technology into 3 buckets. Connection, which is so important for young people. It's why they need to be playing online video games with their friends. It's why they need to be talking to their grandparents once a week on FaceTime. It is creation. It is creating things like awesome things in Minecraft, or all different kinds of things that they're doing, upholding people's dignity, because they can create stuff that's not upholding people's dignity. And consuming. And consuming is not so great. It is when we and our children, for example, are scrolling through Instagram, and we are like, I'm feeling the comparisons, or feeling like, why is that school district doing it like this? And why aren't we doing it like that? And shouldn't that administrator be ashamed of themselves? And like, you're consuming all of this information, you're getting an emotional reaction to that. Why does this family have this cool place they're going to during pandemic? And I'm sitting here like doing what I'm doing. That consumption really brings out the worst in us. And so one of the things to encapsulate for our routine is, remember I said in the beginning, we want to start with that cup of tea. Our kids are going to be in online school or some capacity for about 6 hours a day, maybe. And then what we think is that about 90 minutes to 2 hours a day of them being online in some capacity of connection and creation is appropriate, in general is appropriate. An hour before they go to bed, an hour before we go to bed, no screens, absolutely no screens, an hour before we go to bed, across the board. And that includes us. If we can't sleep and we wake up, do not be grabbing that phone. And this, I'm looking at parents here too. Don't scroll through Facebook, because that is not helpful to us to rest and to give us a routine. So the routine of after the social media, of connection and creation, we can also then fit in our kids reading a book about playing dominoes, like I'm probably going to do with my kids after I do this tonight, so that we are connecting and maintaining the important relationships that we have. The last thing that I'm going to cover before I include Charlie and Katrina is this: what do your kids want to hear? I'm going to give you some a few sentence scripts, so that when your child comes to you with a problem, that you can know basically what to say. Don't just exactly say it the way I'm saying it, because then it'll sound weird, like you just went to some kind of presentation. It has to, come from your own words. But here's the things I want you to say. The theme is validate, don't relate, which is actually a principle. So we don't know what it's like to be kids today. We really do not. And it comes from a good place of saying, I was your age once. I know what it's like to feel these, some feelings, and some of those feelings are evergreen, but we really do need to say, I was your age once, but I don't know what it's like to grow up today. I want to listen to you first before I give you advice. That really shows it actually shows young people the respect of what they're going through, which is so different from what we've gone through. If they confide in you, I'm suggesting that you say, I'm so sorry. Whatever, this is your default response. Whatever they're telling you, if they're confiding in you, don't judge it. Don't start asking a million questions, because they're going to shut down. You just say, I'm so sorry. Thank you for trusting me to tell me. I want to make sure I understand what happened. So can you give me some specifics so I don't make assumptions? That would be appropriate for a problem they're having in school, and the problem they're having with a peer. I want you to avoid, if at all possible, saying some version of, even if it's coming from a good place. I mean, wait, what? Why are you talking? I could have done something about this. Why did you wait so long? It sort of happened to me, by the way, recently with one of my children. I was like, wait, what are we dealing with? This has been going on for how long in school? This is totally a school issue. So you can understandably be frustrated, and you can understandably come out your mouth, say something like, why'd you wait so long? I wish you would have come to me sooner. I could have done something about this before. So instead, you can say, whenever it feels right for you, I would really like to know why you didn't come to me sooner. And if you said that thing, which is super normal and understandable, of why'd you wait so long? You can always go back and repair the relationship. And you can say, hey, you know what? I got sort of caught off guard right there when you said that to me. And I'm really sorry about that. Let me redo that. I really need to know what happened. And so when it's right, I'd really like to know why you felt that way. The reason I want you to think about this is because there's always a good, meaning understandable reason why they didn't come to you sooner. And when you find that out, then you can get a much better handle, a much better way to handle the problem. And that, by the way, is appropriate for parents as it is for teachers and for anybody who's disciplining in school, any kind of administrator, is that we have to figure out what the good, meaning understandable reason why young people are doing the things that they do that stop them from coming to us for help. So with that, one of the things that I'm just want you to think about before we move on is, what do you want to remember? You've been listening to me for about, 27 minutes. This is also about this place to process and find peace. just have a moment to process. So what is just one thing? And actually, if you want to, you can put it in the chat. One thing that you want to remember, because I think, remember, one of the principles was, nobody knows everything. Together we know a lot. What I think we all, when we contribute, really can learn from each other. So if you could do that, that would be great. And also, here you go, if you want to see where we're coming from. And with that, I'm going to pull down my screen, and I am going to invite Charlie and Katrina to come on in.
There they are.
Hi, Charlie.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Katrina.
Hey guys.
Hi, guys. So Charlie, why don't you, I just have to just give a shout out to Charlie and Katrina just for a second, which is education's hard to be in. It's super hard to be in, but when you get to work with awesome people like this, and Katrina's in the neighboring district, actually somewhat close to where we live, where I live, it really makes it like you can do it, like you can keep going because you're working on this together. So it's really an honor and privilege to be able to have the fan community get to see these wonderful people that I've been able to work with over the years. So Charlie, hi.
Hey, well done. I can jump in and say one of the things, and working with you to prepare for this presentation, one of the things that I will continue to remember for myself are the elements of happiness. You focused really on, a place to find peace, but satisfying work is something that I have the privilege of doing, and that comes in all different kinds of ways. So it's good to sit back and reflect on, satisfying work. I find myself to be happy through that. And with that, part of my satisfying work is to work alongside of Katrina. So I want to just give her a short introduction and an explanation for why she's here tonight. So the little bits of if you read the resume, what's most important, at least to me, is that she has 20 years of experience from a paraeducator all the way through a principal, and now is at the helm of the multi-tiered systems of support at a district in Colorado that has roughly 39,000 students. And we have partnered with them to work from a side of education that is often the less important one, but in this conversation tonight gets center stage, which is the social emotional learning. So with that, I believe that we're going to turn to Lonnie to go through some of these questions.
Hi, everybody. Rosalind, great job. I like the Prezi that went really well. I think everybody liked it. It was very organized. And for those of you kind of wondering, we're going to be sending out the video in about a day or two. You'll be getting all of that. We'll be putting in all the stuff from chat as well. I know Rosalind had advised if you want to answer that question about what do you want to remember, she told you to put it in chat. Chat's not two-way chat, actually, so you can use Q&A as some of you have been doing to put in some of those things, and I'll roll through a couple of those really quick. So here's a couple things. Angie says she wants to remember the 60 seconds of listening exercise to address conflict. I was thinking to myself, especially when I'm arguing with myself, I'm going to give myself 60 seconds to argue back with me. We have Vivian says the result of self-regulation is that children go on to become their own teachers. That's excellent as well. Helene says, is listening possible? Another person whose initial is S says, reflecting on the pace change, a year without 20 hours times 4 kids, 20 hours a week, probably extracurriculars times 4 kids a week in activities. That's definitely a pace change. Another person says, connecting more than correcting with my child. That's like a constant thing. My child's 19. It's like, have I learned anything that I first actually learned when he was maybe 4? No, the answer is no. And then Jennifer has commented as well, validate, don't relate, which is interesting. Actually, I'll take a quick segue in. I have a couple questions for you. So let's start a little bit more broadly. One is, I think, just to give people a little bit of a sense, because I'm wondering if they don't quite know. Charlie, maybe, do you want to give the nutshell of what is it, the cultures of dignity, what do you do? You work with school districts, people I think are gleaning that. And what is it you do with these school districts? And I'm sure then Katrina will probably jump in and say like what you do, particularly with her school district. So go ahead.
Sure. So brass tacks first, because I can find myself being too long-winded. So brass tacks, we provide professional development and do service-based learning. So that is also consulting with organizations that prioritize learning. And so I say that broadly because this is where I can be too long-winded, but it lives in education wherever that is found. That is both in the home and the workplace. Now, the core of our work is right in our name, which is dignity. And so we provide services and products. So that's the Distance Learning Playbook as an example, a few others. But the base of our work and the lens that we see everything is through dignity and recognizing worth of all people. And that comes through our curriculum and then helping teachers remember, and oftentimes students remember, that relationships are important and a dynamic that we can all practice. And when we talk about social and emotional learning, we can very easily forget that they are skills. And when they are skills, we can practice those skills to improve and tackle bigger and larger conversations. Oh, Lonnie, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. Usually I'm the one saying, you're muted. You're muted. I was muting myself. So Katrina, did you want to like hop on and just embellish that a little bit before we move on to more direct questions?
Absolutely. We got involved with Cultures of Dignity when our school district decided to make social and emotional learning a really large part of our strategic plan over the last 2 years and into the next 8. It's a 10-year strategic plan. And we were attracted to Cultures of Dignity, one, because they love middle school kids. Who loves middle school kids and who does really good, fun work with middle school kids? And I think we found a value match in that the Cultures of Dignity works with kids and they consult with youth to write curriculum and bring youth to the table in that process. And that is central to our belief around kids have agency and need a sense of belonging and a seat at the table anytime we're doing big work. And they make social and emotional learning fun. So it's not anything canned and prescriptive, but it's all about learning these skills in the social context in which kids live in. And so it was a good fit for us.
Okay, good. So now let's take a look now in terms of the parent school. We'll call it the parent school and partnership, right? It's a common term that's referred to. So in current COVID pandemic, remote distance learning, which is the focus of your book right now, Rosalind, that you co-authored, what's a set of fair expectations that parents can have of a school or a school district? What would you say that would look like?
Well, I'm going to turn this to Katrina, but I want to say one thing before I do that, because it came to me this week because I had a really rough week as a parent with my school district. And you can imagine that I champion teachers and really empathize with the challenges they have. I believe that we've been talking about at Cultures of Dignity and with Katrina's school district, we've been talking about holding grace for people. Holding grace and holding space for people because it's so important right now. And just to do that. And I think we've also gotten to a place though that I want to emphasize that holding grace and space also means holding people accountable. And the way that we do that is with the principles that I first started this presentation with, which is with dignity and being easy on people and hard on ideas. So we can hold grace and we can hold people accountable. Because if your child is not being treated with dignity or cannot function in the classroom right now, or a teacher is making a mistake in various ways, then we need to be able to hold the teacher, the school system accountable, but we have to do it in a way that upholds the teacher or the educator's dignity. So with that, I'd love Katrina to say much more brilliant things.
I don't know if they're much more brilliant, but I do think it's fair to, for school districts, in the same way that we would provide really good communication in a brick and mortar, I think communication becomes ever more essential with, I don't know what things have been like in Chicago, but we've been in, out, back, forth, half day hybrid, Zoom meets, we've been all over the map. And I think what's key to that, again, is how important communication and partnership is with parents, and that is always two ways. And so I think I would want parents to expect to be hearing from their teachers, principals, and administrators regularly and often, and for those people to be eliciting feedback and from teachers and from staff. And I think along with that, into like the more detailed side of things, if putting on my parent hat, really those basic things around, I want to know what my kid is learning. I want to know why they're learning it. And I want to be able to chunk that out so we can have really clear conversations around what learning looks like from week to week.
Charlie, anything to add there?
Yeah, when we were talking about this, or the idea behind this question, is we often talk about what's best for kids is also best for adults. And so when we think about the structures, and Rosalind mentioned it a number of times in her presentation, that structures are also important for adults. And it's easy for us to say that out loud, but not hold ourselves to the same standards. And so when we look about the expectations from parents to the school district, it is that the school district operates with the idea that we are going to do things that are best for kids. So that to me relates right back to what Katrina was saying, is that there will be a standard workflow, and how that is communicated to families is really important. And that's where we want to, rest this relationship, is how can we better communicate together? And why Rosalind spoke about when a parent has to communicate with a school district about a challenging topic, that we are extending grace, because we are all people in this too, doing our best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that actually kind of segues into the next question I had with you, which is that I think sometimes, because everyone always sits in their own perspective, right? And it can be so hard to do that mental and many times emotional practice of perspective taking. So I'm wondering, from your perspectives, what would you say are some of the things that might be going on behind the scenes, that might be limitations that a school might have, whether public, private, parochial, that they would have, that maybe parents aren't always aware of, that they, the parents have a certain view of things, and no view is really 100%. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
I do. I think it's a great question, Lonnie. I really appreciate it. One of the things that's really been on my heart and mind lately is just thinking about who our educators are and why they've come to education. And so really been thinking about two things: the type of people who are attracted to teaching typically are really social beings. They like to be around people. They like social connection. They love to build relationship. And they really like to be around kids and just joy and that social aspect of school. I think the other side of educators is we are attracted to school because we tend maybe to be a little more rigid and a little less flexible. And school has a lot of inherent structure built in. It had, the schedule doesn't change very much from year to year. The schedule doesn't really change much day to day and week to week. And so I think the field attracts people who have both of those qualities. And COVID and remote learning has blown those things away for people. We have lost the ability to be in classrooms, working with our students and working with our colleagues. And the predictability and routine of our work life has been incredibly disrupted. And I think when we talk about that humanity, that has disrupted, I think, educators. And so they are also feeling a lot of grief and discomfort. They're handling unpredictability. I think another theme is no matter where you are in your educational career, this feels like your first year teaching or your second year teaching. And so there's a lot of overwhelm out there.
Wouldn't you include that with, Katrina, wouldn't you include that with administrators as well? They can't say that. I think they have to just put that face on of like, I've got this, right? But don't you feel that administrators are in the same boat as well? And many of them came up from teaching.
Absolutely. And when you were saying that, Rosalind, what came to my mind, specific to COVID is, we've asked our principals to essentially become public health experts. How do you keep your whole building safe, your staff safe, your students safe, your community safe? And so, there's a lot of expectations and pressure right now.
Yeah, the thing that really hurts my heart, even though I've had really hard times, it's not like I haven't had a hard time recently, but it hurts my heart when I see on social media some parents saying about administrators, like, you should be ashamed of yourself. And I mean, I just can't, maybe we're not doing the best we can. We are, but like, that's messy. But shame is such a powerful, it's like, what do you think? Like, people aren't doing this on purpose. We're trying to do the best we can. And I think we need to really take a step back, because it's so easy to just come across that in a way that doesn't help. It doesn't repair our villages, and our villages need that, I think, the most we've ever needed it.
I'll play a small piece of devil's advocate. What do you feel that school administrators could perhaps do better to improve their fate here, in the sense of course, there's missteps. There's missteps everywhere on the part of everyone involved in the environment. So what would you say that could be something that, from your experience of working with schools, maybe Charlie, you have something to jump in on this, which is that, what would you, if you were to give some friendly, just quick friendly advice, like soundbite advice, that would be like, parents would appreciate and really respond positively. It helps and kind of feathers the nest if a certain kind, it could be a tonal issue, like how you say things. Do you have any thoughts on that, about what could maybe help ameliorate some of what can be over time just some friction?
Yeah, thanks for, I'll be quick on this. I go back to a book that I read a few years ago on community by Peter Block, and it was written like well before anything like this ever happened. But he uses leadership in a really interesting way, and that leaders ought to focus on just how we gather and the questions that we ask when we gather. And so to the educators and especially the administrators, the way in which we're gathering is absolutely upside down. But that doesn't mean we don't have a sense of belonging that we're all yearning for. And there's also a tension that I think is a part of this conversation, which is that when we talk about and when we write a book about generalities, that doesn't feel like it solves my own problem, but each individual is the specific that we all need to also care about. So as we look for the general in a school and as an administrator, we also have to keep in mind that this whole system works through individual students and their families. And there's that just inherent tension in balancing the two. So it does have to do with tone, and it does have to do with how we focus on how we gather.
So I want Charlie, if you could, we have the fan producers on the back end. They can put in chat a link. Do you remember the title of the book? You said the author and the title of what you just said?
Yeah, it's just Community by Peter Block.
And that's Block?
Yes.
Okay, good. If one of the Zoom producers, thank you, Deb. I appreciate that. Maybe if you could find a link, that would be great. Okay, so here's what I guess before I turn to some audience questions, one other thing I kind of want to know, in this parent-school partnership, what is it that you would say that a school district or a private school, parochial school, any school administration and leadership, what is it that they need from parents for the smooth functioning of the ecosystem at this time? What would you, if you had one or two things that you would point out in particular that parents can bring to the table to have it be just very a nice effective ecosystem? Any of you can
Katrina,
answer.
Yeah, Katrina, why don't you start? There's one thing I want to say, but why don't you start?
Okay, hopefully we don't want to say the same thing, but
We'll
that
see.
could happen. The two that came to my mind, Lonnie, as you were asking the question, the first one is not direct, but it goes back to what Rosalind was talking about before around emotional granularity. We need to be able to sit with our discomfort. And we are all incredibly uncomfortable right now. And what an amazing time to practice and model for our young people sitting in that discomfort. And I think the reason why it came to my mind is because virtual learning makes our classroom so much more visible, and parents are seeing so much more now the process of learning, and learning is inherently uncomfortable. You have to have that tension in order to create learning. And teachers are very used to seeing that. But for parents who aren't in education, it's hard, it's difficult to watch your students struggle and to grasp learning and new concepts. And so just being able to sit in that discomfort, I think, is key right now. And then the second one just always goes back to a more specific, if you are struggling with something with a teacher or with a school or an administrator. I mean, everything that Roz talked about in her presentation around preparing for conflict is key. And I would just emphasize, picking that one thing that you want to get out of a conversation and pre-thinking about possible solutions so you can get to that part of the conversation.
Yeah, yes, actually it's sort of a dovetail. It's not like the same, it's sort of a dovetail. I know. You can tell Katrina and I have been working a lot together recently. I think if you're like walking by your kids and they're in their Zoom class and you think like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on right now? And I know a lot of parents are having that. I've had a couple of experiences like that. I think that what's really important is if your child complains to you about what's happening is you can affirm the child's experience without undermining the dignity of the teacher. And so what that means is that you can say, yeah, that's really tough. Like, I totally see that. And then you can ask your child, what is it? So what is it that's happening in the class that you don't like, or isn't help more to the point, isn't helping you learn? And then what I would do, and here's the key, actually, what I've really been hearing from teachers and from parents and from students is that we're on a short fuse, right? Like, a lot of us are impatient or we're on emails. Teachers are getting quadruple the amount of emails that they've gotten in the past. So sometimes our kids don't have a lot of experience sending emails to people when they need something. And this is an opportunity, as Katrina said before, to really actually show social emotional learning in a skill to be able to communicate what you want in an academic setting. So if your child is having a class that's not working for them, they have to express what they don't like. They need to put that in writing. I would actually, as the parent, I would review that just for politeness and for clarity of what they're trying to get across. Because sometimes our kids are sending over emails that come across as being rude. Sometimes there are teachers who can do that too. And there's no excuse for that. I'm just saying that there's an opportunity for us to really build social emotional learning. So if you're, as a parent, and your child wants to do that, identify what the problem is. They're going to communicate it, I would say, from like 10 years and up. Otherwise, you're doing it, and same rules apply. Clear and polite, and to the point. And then have a Zoom call with them to figure out what is actually going on, because the more person to person in any capacity we can have, the better to resolve a problem.
Got it. Okay, we're at 7:55, so let's be quick. I want to remind folks, if you purchase a copy of the Distance Learning Playbook, there is, they've been putting in the chat the places to buy it. Both Charlie and Roz are going to be joining us for the after hours. It's going to start about 8:05. You can ask a bunch more questions. All the cameras are on, and chat is two-way, and after hours, it's a whole lot of fun. So please make a note. So I'm going to go here over to the questions that were submitted during this event, and we'll go with the most upvotes here from Sarah. She says, my teens do not find remote school to be, quote, meaningful work, unquote. One is an introverted self-starter who studies no matter what. The other is an extrovert with ADHD. They both find remote learning painful. Not clear how to reduce the pain.
I've been talking a lot. I think one of you guys should take it. Plus, it's a hard question.
You want to go, Katrina?
No, you can start us, Charlie.
All right. My answer.
I hope
My
that's
answer
not
is
like
that.
avoiding the answer. I mean, it's
Yeah.
actually the topic about, particularly the piece about ADHD, came in a number of questions that were submitted ahead of time to kids with executive function issues as ADHD. This is something that is very much on parents' minds. So I would appreciate a nice, thoughtful answer.
Yeah.
Sure. I will be as succinct as possible. And it is something that I grew up with my mother reminding me that these are moments, not lifetimes, which is incredibly infuriating when you're in these moments that feel like lifetimes. And what that means is these are challenges that we will work through, and they will serve us to whatever is the next challenge that we come up against. So what I encourage parents to do is to remind our young people that there is a purpose to life, and the greatest challenge that we have is to continue to find that purpose. And even if you don't find it in your social studies work, that is okay, because that concept of trying will serve you as you continue on this lifetime pursuit of why am I here? What am I supposed to do with my life?
Okay, and then we have from Robin, she says, teaching right now is difficult and teaching SEL can be really tough. How could we support teachers? What are some ways to strengthen the parent-teacher partnership in this highly charged moment? She got 3 upvotes on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, now is the time absolutely for us to be focusing on social emotional learning. And I think underpinning even the last question are having really strong social emotional learning skills, like being able, what Ross talked about earlier, being able to self-regulate, being able to self-manage. All of those things culminate in able to for students to become self-directed learners. And so this is the time where we should really be focusing on social emotional learning and embedding it in everything we do, along with the importance of play and creating relationship and a sense of belonging. I mean, I can tell you in our district, to your previous person's question, engagement and meaningful engagement is a huge topic of conversation right now. And what does that really mean? And how are we creating virtual classrooms where kids want to show up, turn on that camera, and participate? And so getting out of the compliance question and getting into, are we giving kids a purpose and a reason to show up every day where they can feel connected? And so we do a ton of how do you move cooperative learning structures into an online environment? How do you play games online? Because you've got to bring some play and connection into that classroom as well.
And I'll say quickly that the other thing we're doing that we got in response from surveys in Katrina's district, because we always have to ask young people, they're the experts of receiving this information and this education. And so one of the things that we are beginning to work on is there's understandable reasons why most districts are saying to young people, you don't have to have your camera on during class because of equity issues and their comfort level and all of that. We know that young people are feeling incredibly self-conscious on camera all the time. And we also know that not having the camera makes it easier to disengage in the classroom. So what we're doing with some of the schools in her district is we are creating for student voice to work with the social emotional learning counselors and to work with the teachers to create norms in the classroom together about how we can have these 2 very important things, that we need engagement and the cameras on, and we need to acknowledge what the problems are with the cameras on. So working together, we're going to solve the norms based on those principles. We're going to create norms so that the young people feel that they're included and that they have ownership in the classroom and the norms of the classroom. And when you do that, then it gets much easier for young people to feel in all different kinds of learners that they have been welcomed into the classroom and they have a place in the classroom, and that the rules are based on principles that make sense to them.
Okay, well, we'll end on that note. Excellent note, by the way. Katrina, thank you so much for coming and giving us some insight about what this looks like in your school district. It's a huge district. Charlie and Roz, we'll see you in just a few minutes in the after hours room. Everyone, thanks for tuning in to FAN. We have our program next week with Jeff Salingo. And then the week after that, on the 14th, we're welcoming one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, Alicia Garza. We have an incredible December. So thanks, everyone.